friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about canned meats versus dehydrated meats. And this is home canned, home dehydrated meats of various kinds and a little bit on their uses and what I'm finding that I prefer. So let's go back a little bit. That when I first started pressure canning, the first thing I ever canned was beets, because we had been blessed with a whole bunch of beets, and the best way to put them up for us was to can them. And even though I had my pressure canner for a few years, it was the first time I finally used it. And once I did that, I was hooked on canning. So I do love to can a lot of things. And before that, I was water bath canning a lot of things like tomatoes, peaches, salsas, jams, and so on. However, through the past few years, I'm starting to find more and more things I actually prefer to have dehydrated for several reasons. So first, let's talk about the canned meats and their benefits. I will always keep some canned meats on hand. So what I have here is some salmon that Patrick brought back from one of his fishing trips with his father back in 2019. And he brought back a lot. So we had a lot to put up and I didn't want to freeze it all. Here I've got some ground beef that I canned in 2015. And by the way, that white layer you see on top is not mold. That is just fat from the beef that's floated to the top. And you'll see the same here in the home canned beef roast. There's some fat floating on top, and then also some venison from a hunting trip. And this one was also from 2019. And then this beef here is from 2015. These are definitely nice to have on hand because you can use them immediately right out of the jar, whether it be you just sit down with a fork and eat it straight out of the jar, which all of these are quite good that way. Or you can use them immediately in any kind of dish, whether it be like for the salmon, this is a good one to use to make some kind of spread out of. That would be similar to like a tuna fish spread, just salmon instead, which I actually prefer. Salmon or steelhead, both are excellent in this case. Or for making something like a casserole, so I'll use something like this in place of tuna for a tuna noodle casserole. Love this, again, prefer over tuna. And then you've got the venison or the beef would be very similar. That's something you could throw immediately into a stroganoff, a stew, a soup, whatever it is you want to make. And then the ground beef, same thing. It's immediate use. And again, all of these are great straight from the jar just as is. So in case you're really hungry and you don't want to take the time to make something. Not that I've done that, but I have eaten pieces straight from the jar when I'm preparing something. And I do like all these methods, and I do like having these on hand. However, when it comes to the ground beef, once I finally work through the many jars of ground beef I put up like this, I did it mostly to get them out of my freezer. I probably won't can any more ground beef because of the way I like to use it. I'm finding I prefer where is it here? Should be here. The dehydrated ground beef over the canned. Because to me, it holds its texture better when you go to rehydrate it. And it seems to just hold a flavor better. Whereas I find the canned ground beef tends to want to disintegrate. It's like little teeny tiny pieces rather than staying in bigger pieces, which I kind of prefer depending on what I'm using it in. And again, this is just one jar of each thing that's back there. I have quite a bit of all these. I have a lot of the ground beef. I have quite a bit of the ground Italian sausage dehydrated up, leaving the fat in, by the way, you can see down there. So I've got all that great flavor. One of the most recent things that I just had a video come out on was the chicken sausages I've been getting from Butcher Box. And you'll find my referral link to Butcher Box down below. But these are sausages, they're like in links that I simply sliced up and dehydrated just to make more room in my freezer. But I started with just one first so I could sample it and loved it right off the bat. And then did all of the packages that were in my freezer. So I currently have 8 jars total. I have 4 of the apple chicken sausage and 4 of the Italian chicken sausage. And so far I've only used them in a couple things, mostly just snacking on them. But as far as actually cooking with them, I did make some ramen and added some of I can't remember which one, I think it was the Italian chicken sausage in there. And then the other day I made Patrick a scrambler where I took the apple chicken sausage, I broke it up into smaller pieces, and then just soaked it in hot water, and then, and let it rehydrate that way, and it does great. And then added it to the scrambled eggs and then let it sit in there for a few more minutes before I cooked them. And it worked out really good. Added some nice flavor to the scrambler. And then back here, I've got some dehydrated turkey. You'll see it's a little teeny tiny pieces. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And I've got some, this is actually, what is this? This is beef jerky. And then I have 2 jars of elk jerky back there. So the one thing about the jerky itself, if you're going to do jerky, to me, the reason I put jerky up is for the sake of having something that would be more of an emergency kind of food, something you could pack and go. So this and even these sausages here are great for adding to go bags, for taking hiking, camping, if you want something that you can snack on just as is. These are good though straight out of the jar too. Well, actually the ground beef, not the turkey is too, but more so the ground beef and the ground sausage are really great as a snack to straight out of the jar. Your jerky, if you're wanting to use that to cook with, it's not going to rehydrate the same way your sausages and your ground meats are. So that's not something I would use in cooking. But all these other things I would, including the turkey or chicken when I have that. Sometimes I'll do that as well. So any of these, the ground meats or these sausages that I've sliced, the easiest way to use them is to simply throw them into soups, sauces, stews, whatever it is you're making that's already got plenty of liquid. Just put it straight in there and let it cook. Gravies as well. I've done that with the Italian sausage and the ground beef both. I've added them to gravies without pre-soaking them first. So while I'm making the gravy, because I don't buy gravy, I make it from scratch. So you're already starting with some kind of liquid base, be it a broth or plain water or even milk, depending on what type of gravy it is. And you're just throwing all your ingredients in there. So the flour you're using to thicken, your dried meats, your dried vegetables, and your dried herbs all in there, and everything cooks and rehydrates together. And so that also will apply to your soups and stews and sauces. Now, in the case of the eggs, yes, I did soak them for a bit first because I didn't think the egg mixture would rehydrate the sausage well enough on its own. So in that case, I did soak it. But that also would apply to anytime you're going to, like, maybe you want to use something like that in more of a stir fry, something that's not a liquid base, then you are going to want to soak these. So reconstitute them by soaking them in some kind of liquid. Again, that can be a broth. It can even be wine that you would normally cook with anyway, and you want to get that flavor. It can be a mixture of Bragg's liquid aminos with something else if you're using any of this in more of an Asian type dish, and that works really great. I have had no issues. Now, let's talk a little bit about the poultry. So when I first dehydrated up some chicken and turkey, I did it mostly to have it more of as a jerky, because I knew it would be chewy. I knew it wouldn't rehydrate well, but I did go ahead and try it once. And just as I figured, it stayed tough. It wouldn't fully rehydrate when I tried to cook with it. But here's something I did find. Now, one was people said that if they pressure cook the turkey or chicken before they dehydrate it, that would make it reconstitute much better. But what I found simply by accident really was that when I froze all that meat first, after, let's say, it's after Thanksgiving, you've got all this leftover turkey, which is exactly what happened. I had thrown it all in the freezer and then decided I want to get that out of the freezer. I need to make more space again. So after it was fully frozen, I took it out and decided to go ahead and dehydrate it. Because I figured if nothing else, because this is what you can do too, is if any of your stuff doesn't want to reconstitute well enough, you can always powder it and use it that way in whatever meal. Obviously, you're not going to get the pieces, but at least you're getting the meat and the flavor in there. But what I found with the turkey is that when I went to dehydrate it, instead of being tough like had turned out before, it actually turned out very crispy and light, and I find it reconstitutes much easier. So something about the freezing process, if you're not one that likes to pressure cook things, which I pressure can, I don't pressure cook. Well, then this would be one way to do it, is simply throw your leftover meat in the freezer, let it freeze all the way through, then pull it back out and dehydrate it, and you'll find it takes on a much better consistency. So you can see in this little clip right here, this is the same turkey. When I took it out of the dehydrator, I was surprised at how easy I could just break it in my fingers. And then I did try adding it to a turkey a la king that I was making, which is a common dish I'll make after Thanksgiving with leftover turkey, but I can also do that with the dehydrated turkey as well. The one thing though is it does naturally break up a lot smaller. So it won't hold those big chunk pieces quite as easily, especially if you're wanting to pack it into the jar. Well, it just because it breaks up so easy, and it's so crispy that it just kind of crumbles, but it's still quite good. So this is the way I'm going to be preserving the turkey meat. You could can it, and I have canned leftover chicken meat, and that's really good too. Now, why I do like the canned meats for their immediate use, no need to cook them for a while. You just need to heat them through. So let's say you want to make a stew. You can take a jar of your home canned potatoes, a jar of the meat, a jar of carrots, a jar of green beans, a jar of peas, whatever vegetables it is you already have canned up, and you can just throw them in a pot, liquid and all. You don't need to add water, and just heat it through and it's ready. It's all you got to do is heat it through, which might take about 5 minutes, 10 tops, depending on how big the pot is. And there you go. It's pretty much an instant meal. The only thing that'd be faster than that is when you have your own home canned soup, which I do have a few of those. I have some canned soups that you only have to open one jar, throw it in a pot, heat it up, and it's ready to go. But with the dehydrated meats, one of the things I like best about these is the amount of space it takes up in storage. There's approximately a pound of meat in each one of these jars. And same thing with these. So that's approximate. It's going to, vary depending on how much space they take up in the jar. But with it dehydrated, I would say at least that's the same amount of meat that's in a quart jar. So I'm reducing the amount of space it's taking up by almost half. And you'll find that with a lot of dehydrated things. Some things are going to take up about a quarter of the amount of space they would by dehydrating, or even less than by canning. So this is what I prefer about the dehydrating. And it's also lighter weight. So if you need to pack things up in a hurry, you don't have as much weight not only sitting on your shelves, but also if you have to pack and go for some reason, you got a lot less weight you're having to worry about. So this is why I'm finding myself doing a lot more dehydrated meats rather than canned meats. Again, I will always keep some canned meats on hand because of their ease of use, but dehydrating more and more is becoming the way for me to go, and I'll probably keep experimenting with more types of meat and dehydrating it, including salmon. I'm going to try that. I mean, you can smoke salmon, but it's not the same thing. So I do want to try dehydrating some fish and see how well that does in various things. But as with anything, whenever you're experimenting, don't do a whole bunch at once. Try, just like I did with the sausage, I just did one of the links, sliced it up, dehydrated it, figured if worse comes to worse, and I didn't like it, I can feed it to the dog. It would be dog treats, and he would love it, which he does. And of course, I did feed him a couple pieces just as a treat. But yeah, always start small. Don't, just because I say this is good and I like it, don't take everything out of your freezer and dehydrate it and then find out you don't really like it in anything. You don't like the way the texture turned out or whatever. You must always start small. And by the way, I vacuum seal all of these, especially when it comes to meat. You need to vacuum seal it. So for example, the turkey, I had a jar of turkey that I was working through just like this, and I forgot to reseal the jar after I took the batch out that I was using to make the turkey a la king. I forgot to reseal it up, and just in the time it sat back there, it was already going rancid. We're vacuum sealing even in a cool room. Where vacuum sealing will prevent any of the fats that you keep, that I say keep the fat in there. It's the vacuum sealing that's going to prevent it from going rancid. And I found that with other things too, including peanut butter powder, which does still have fat in it. If you don't vacuum seal the peanut butter powder, it will go rancid, at least on the top layer. But you can take that top layer off and then get down to the bottom, and it's usually pretty good. So anyway, that's just some tips you want to think about. So I'll link down below to some videos I did on vacuum sealing and different things that you can use to vacuum seal with. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas of ways that you can preserve some meats and keep putting some food away and make more room in your freezer as well as in your pantry. Oh, and please put some tips and ideas down below how you like to use your meats canned or dehydrated, and what's your favorite ones to can or dehydrate. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.